Hotel employees, what is the most weird, disturbing thing you have seen in a hotel room? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. I worked as a houseman. Basically, I'd get calls to bring stuff to rooms like extra pillows or whatever, and I kept getting calls for the same room. An older couple kept taking turns answering the door wearing just underwear. Must have been in their 60s at least. They needed a lamp, pillows, blankets. Must have been there 4 or 5 times. The last time they answered the door, the man was naked answering the door, and the woman was named on the bed. They wanted me to come in. I said no, and said I won't be answering calls from them. Next story. My time to shine. Worked graveyard shift for years, and my favorites included 1. The elderly lady who checked in for a grandchild's wedding and then proceeded to walk 2 young men in black fetish wear on leashes up and down the halls at 3 a.m. for her 2-week stay. Made sure to give them treats if they behaved and didn't disturb anyone with their barking. Threatened to neuter one if he didn't quieten down. 2. The mild-mannered professor type in town for a conference on economics. In tweed all day, but in a sequined black ball gown all night. Minibar also found 15 giant sex toys stuffed in the minibar fridge after he checked out. 3. The bikey convention that slapped "Stop thinking, start drinking" stickers on everyone who walked past their rooms and gave out small minibar bottles like they were party favors. NFI why they were all covered in glitter though, but they were nice. 4. The young lass trying to hang upside down from a chandelier in the exec suite while eating chips, and when asked why, said that the floor was covered in talking mushrooms. Assumed she was tripping balls that night. Managed to convince her the mushies were nice and wouldn't hurt her, and if she didn't come down, she risked being kicked out. 5. The drag queen versus hipsters rap battle. Nuff said, it was glorious. Queens won every time. 6. The dude dressed as an emu trying to climb a column in the lobby and singing the coconut song. He wasn't wearing pants or underwear, just a lot of feathers which covered 4/5. Wasn't even a guest of the hotel. There is more. Dear gods, there's more. But those were my faves, and not too dark. Next story. I used to work part-time at a love hotel in Roppongi, Japan, as a cleaner and receptionist. I had a pretty fun time and didn't see anything unusual or out of the ordinary. Moaning through the walls, used condom on the bed, occasional piss, blood, or crap on bedsheet. Probably the weirdest thing was seeing a fat Japanese businessman crawling while leashed to probably a hooker from elevator to entering their room. Next story. Semen on practically every surface, including the ceiling. A fishing tackle box full of near 30 different strains of substances. 2 brand new unlocked iPhone filled to max capacity with adult film. A large duffel bag filled with sex toy of varying sizes and colors. This was 1 room and 1 guest. Black lighting the room may have been a mistake. Next story. A man completely losing his mind in our lobby after his wife killed herself in the bathtub with pills while he was down at the restaurant picking up their dinner. Poor bastard had to be subdued by the police. He tore everything to pieces. Next story. A group of guests got arrested and we had to clean their room out. They had a check printer and a bunch of fake IDs and lists of routing account numbers. They had set up in the room and been operating for a couple of days apparently. They also let their dog crap all over the room. Next story. My experiences have all been pretty tame so far. The weirdest was probably this older Middle Eastern guy that used to come somewhat regularly. He was super rude to staff, but came across as very conservative and serious. The last time he stayed, he left several sex toy, the biggest bottle of lube I've ever seen, and some kind of harness with clamps on it. Haven't seen him since. Next story. I've never worked in hospitality, but had an old coworker who did. We will call her Jill. Jill had worked front desk part-time at a small hotel in the downtown core of my city. I made the mistake of asking her what the scariest, creepiest thing she had experienced. Jill told me had checked in a lady in her mid-late 40s for a 2-night stay. Dressed in almost all black, but nothing out of the ordinary and carrying a small backpack. Sure, short stay. It made sense. The second day of the lady staying there, Jill arrived to her shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., and asked her coworkers how the day went. They told her it was quite slow, but they did not notice the lady, whom Jill had checked in the night before, come out of her room the entire day. They all thought it was strange, but maybe she had gone out and no one noticed. Fast forward a few hours, the rain began, and Jill is about 30 minutes from clocking out. Bored. This was in the early 2000s when there was no smartphone to cure boredom. When she glanced at the row of CCTV's monitors, she noticed the one outside, mounted between the first and second floors facing the alley, directed at the back door of the hotel, quickly cut out for a split second. But Jill explained it wasn't like an issue with the camera feed, but instead, as if something quickly passed in front of the camera. She was taken back a bit, wondering what that was, and rationalized it was a bird or a bat that flew in front of the camera. She brushed it off as she packed her stuff to leave. Jill said bye to her manager, the only other person working, and clocked out. About 15 minutes after Jill left, she got a call from her manager, frantically tell her to come back to the hotel, and that he will explain why when she arrives. Jill's heart was racing, not knowing what was going on. As Jill pulls up to the hotel, she sees a few police cars at the front of the hotel with flashing lights reflecting from the wet roads and neighboring buildings, indicating more squad cars around the back of the hotel. The manager, who was at the right in his office for almost the entirety of Jill's shift, told her a homeless man came into the hotel lobby, saying there's a body outside the back door of the hotel. The manager told Jill the homeless man was walking along the alley and saw a black bag or sack by the hotel walls. As the man walked closer, he then made out it was a body with long hair, with blood pooling up and getting mixed in the rainwater. It turns out a guest had jumped out the 6th floor window, landing headfirst on the ground. A check on who was staying in that room was the same woman Jill checked in the night before. The police determined the guest must have climbed out the window no more than in 1.5 hours before the homeless man found her, which would have been around the same time Jill saw the quick blackout of the CCTV camera. Sorry for being wordy. Next story, working graveyard. About 4 years ago, I had this old woman, around 70 years old, go on a complete paranoid rampage thinking someone was chasing her. She demanded I open the lobby doors for her. We closed them after 11 p.m., and I used the little window to speak with her, but I told her no. She kept asking other guests to let her in their rooms. I eventually called the cops, and they showed up shortly and helped her back into her room. 15 minutes later, she's back at my window with a real batarang knife, tapping on the window to let me open the doors for her. She was going on and on about how Bruce Wayne works for her. I called cops again, and this time told them she was threatening me and guests with a knife. They came straight away and arrested her. Found out later that she was suffering from severe dementia and Alzheimer's, and that her children were looking for her. When I spoke to the children, they had no idea how she was able to book a room at our hotel, because she couldn't even tell the time properly. I quit shortly after. That place was a dump. Next story, worst thing? Woman murdered the guy in the hotel room and bailed. Housekeeping found the poor things. Just awful all around. Most disturbing thing? We had a yearly group sex. Boutique hotels, man. Rich people are wild. Where all 29 rooms changed to different themed because this one super rich group bought us out for the weekend. Each room had a different hot theme. In one room, someone hacked off the shower head and replaced it with a 15-foot metallic hose that had an attachment. We tried to puzzle that one out for a long time, then decided it was better to just pretend it never happened in the first place. Next story. Worked in lots of fancy hotels in my 20s. Lots of drugs. So many drugs. Was the best part of the job. Usually lots of sex toys. Next story. I don't work at a hotel, but while traveling, I was staying in a vintage motel for the night, and when I went to fill the ice bucket, there were 2 syringes underneath the plastic lining of the bucket. Next story. Housekeepers found that the 30 or so golfers that stayed the previous night had all gone into one of the rooms, or maybe the towel was brought between them rooms, and there was semen all over it. They refused to touch it. Manager had to go and black bag it with a stick. Thing looked like it had been glazed by Godzilla. Next story. Not in a hotel room, but have so many stories from bartending in an atrium at an Embassy Suites in Austin, Texas. My first week, I had a group of Army veterans, ages 60 plus, and they were all very nice, but one of them was going through things. I could tell because all the others were offering him condolences for losing a wife, same time just a year before. Unfortunately, the guy had too much to drink, and Duke could tell, so I cut him off. But his friends were buying him beers and giving them to him without my knowledge. But when I found out, I cut the entire group off. They left for a couple hours. The poor guy came back by himself, hammered, and tripped down the stairs in the atrium, 3 steps, and pooped himself. He then ended up walking into the elevator, clear glass, and proceeded to stick his hands in his pants, a smear crap all over himself and the windows. I also had a lady slam a door on her thumb and actually lost it. Next story, I used to be in the hotel industry. 12 years management experience by working my way up. 1. Death on 2 different occasions at different hotels. 2. Sex being filmed and me getting invited to join them. 3. Smoking with 2 A-list celebrities. 4. A woman blowing up a microwave trying to cook, some drugs in the presidential suite. Most luxurious and expensive room. 5. Housekeeper found some satanic stuff after a guest checked out. Pentagrams and stuff. Dolls covered in red substance. Some staff believe the room is haunted. 6. A disgruntled guest pooped in the air vent. Took us a week to locate the source of the smell. Couldn't sell the room for 2 weeks. 7. A lad fell from the balcony and passed away. Hotel industry is not easy. Your day-to-day shift work takes a huge toll on your mental health. I have the utmost respect for retail, hotel, and tourism industry employees. Also, a group of people from a certain nationality tend to boil their dirty socks and underwear in electric water kettles. It's way too common, and that's why I never use water kettles, coffee mugs, cutlery, or glasses from the coffee station. Next story, I was night audit and had a guy come in one night who I had a bad gut feeling about. I tried everything I could think of to keep him from renting a room, but he circumvented it all. Couple hours later, I get a call from a guest who says her ceiling is leaking. The guy was so high on something, he turned the bathtub on and left it while he passed out. I couldn't wake him and had to call the cops for a wellness check. He ended up flooding out a full 1/3 of the hotel through 6 floors. Next story. We found a body of a guest who passed away in the shower, and her body had hot water running on her for well over 8 hours. The condition of the body was very disturbing. Next story. I was in city, and I was staying at a hotel with maybe 3 or 4 cars parked outside. Anyways, I had just checked in, and right when I closed the door to my room, I hear a woman's muffled screaming through the walls, and a man speaking quietly. I had just gotten out of jail and was in a complete daze, so truthfully, I wasn't really in the mood to play hero. I called the front desk and let them know someone was possibly being held against their will and was definitely being abused or assaulted in the room over, and it didn't sound consensual in the slightest. A minute later, I heard a knock on their door, and the man opened his door almost instantly. He apologized for the noise and said everything was good and they would keep it down. But sadly, the employee never did a wellness check or asked to talk to the woman. I called again and asked him to go back and ask about the woman, but I don't believe he ever did. I didn't hear a sound from that room for the rest of my stay. That was 7 years ago, and I still reflect on whether or not I should have done more to help that poor soul. Next story. So, this happened in 1998. I was working at this hotel in Vegas as security. We got a noise complaint from a room, so I go knock. This douche-looking guy opens the door. I walk in, glass table is smashed. I ask what's going on. He says, drugs and alcohol, and slams some cash in my hand. I laugh. Then as I'm about to leave, I turn around and see in the mirror this girl hanging from the wall in the bathroom. I walk in, they start screaming in an accident and all this stuff. Total chaos. Then this douche-looking Christian Slater hit me in the chest. I fall back in the bathtub bleeding, and they lock me in the room with an escort. So I'm like stuck in there bleeding, screaming. Then it gets a little fuzzy. Next story. I used to be a hotel manager, and there are so many things. It's a blur of things. But what sticks out was a couple who used to go from hotel to hotel. They would basically rent a room 1 to 2 nights. Then they would keep extending it. They would destroy the room, for example, break the TV, and then call corporate saying, "They gave me a room with a broken TV." But the worst and most unforgivable thing is what the husband was doing to his wife behind closed doors. This is what would ultimately get them banned from properties and got them in trouble with the law. He would post her on Backpage, and they would do all kinds of crime out of their room. They would go around, from local hotel to local hotel, doing this, and they would eventually just get banned from each property. The problem, though, is that hotels can turn over fairly quickly sometimes. New front desk manager, new GM, new front desk staff. So if they waited a couple of years, they could get away with booking another room at the hotel they were previously banned, just because no one knew who they were. Plus, a lot of the time, hotel newbies don't think to check the system for guest history, or to see if they had an existing profile, which, if they did check for their profile, they would see that these guests were red flagged, but oftentimes, those staff members just don't take those steps. So unfortunately, you'd see these assholes on the in-house list, because the evening staff were new and they didn't realize they checked in banned guests. So ultimately, these guests got away with cycling around different hotel properties, getting banned, later returning to those properties and causing havoc. The other reason why these guests were memorable is because the husband's mother lived locally. My resort had a golf club, where she was a resident, a member, an avid golfer, and was always nice to staff. She was a very wealthy and very sweet woman who was kind to the staff. She would bring cookies and such. Unfortunately, she had a real hystatin of a son. She had the sense to file an injunction to have custody of the kids. The last I heard of them, they were busted for escort in the last property that would let them in. During the bust, their hotel room was stuffed full of flakka. The husband was also another level of crazy. He was a DJ in the 90s. From what I can tell, he was involved in one event, but he would go to the front desk and everyone who would listen and say, "I invented Ultra. Bro, you DJ'd once in 1995. Next story. I was a building engineer for a big hotel. Basically, I got calls to go to rooms and fix stuff. A lot of people die in hotels. I'd get called a few times a year to open a room safe for the cops with a body wrapped in a sheet on the bed. One time a guy was stalking one of the guests. He tried to break into the room. Then I had to lead the cops around the hotel chasing the guy before he jumped out a third-floor window into an interior courtyard. He then broke the window into another room, and the guest in there wounded him. Then we were able to get him in handcuffs. Later that night, the guest he was stalking called me up to her room to fix the air conditioning and asked me for a cigarette. So I unlocked the window and disabled the smoke detector, and we sat smoking and talking for a bit. She seemed pretty shook up. The guy had been hounding her for weeks. Next story. My family, brother, dad, and I, had worked for hotels on and off for 10 years, and we have seen some very terrible, weird stuff in rooms. Top 3 are as followed. 1. A long-term guest of the hotel hadn't been seen in a few days, which was a bit odd for him, so my dad, as well as maintenance, checked on him. Let's just say he unalived himself days prior. To this day, my dad will talk about that story. Smell once they opened the door that was sealed shut. 2. During a wedding, a guest decided it was a good time to pleasure himself looking out of his window that overlooked the courtyard where the ceremony was taking place. Thankfully, only a few guests had the sightlines to see this guy. Took about 5 minutes to get him to stop. Police called. 3. Before his death, Biz Markie was playing different shows around the US at small casinos. At this point, I was running a kitchen, but the front desk didn't have time to get his room service to him. So I figured, damn it, why not? He was famous and all. When I knocked on the door, it was already cracked, and he said to come into the living room. The suites are basically apartments. As I got into the room, there he was, butt-ass naked, laying across the couch. When he saw it was a dude with a chef's coat on, he replies, "Aw, my bad, man. I thought you'd be a female." Then just proceeds to throw a towel over his crap and asks if I'm going to the show later. Next story. I once worked with hotel peeps. The one that stuck with me was this. Someone emptied glass water bottles, filled them with urine, and placed them back in the fridge. Next story. I had a colleague who used to be a hotel manager, and he had a wild story about a woman who checked in who was clearly going through some sort of mental health episode. She paid for her entire stay, including damage deposit, in advance in cash, and every few hours would return to the front desk and ask them to hold on to more cash, to the tune of something like $10,000. She tried to pay it against her room, but the hotel apparently had a policy that you couldn't pay more than double what your expected bill was going to be, so they just wound up putting the rest in the safe. Eventually, in the wee hours of the morning, they got a complaint from someone in the room below that there was water leaking from the ceiling. They knocked on the door, no one answered, so they let themselves in and discovered she'd turned on the shower with the temperature as high as it would go, jammed the drain with towels, and basically just left, flooding the room. They never saw her again either. She never came back for the cash she left with them, which, for some weird reason, the hotel actually wasn't allowed to use to pay for the damages she'd caused, and had, at some point in the night, just wandered away never to return. Next story. I found crap in the shower before. That was push her into the sink, but only halfway trough. Once the complete wall was painted with diarrhea, and a lunchbox filled with a brown liquid that smelled worse than anything I have ever smelled. One time the trash in the room was full of puke, while there was still trash in it, so I had to fish the trash out before cleaning it, and way too many stiff socks. Next story. Not in hospitality, but remember reading about an incident that took place at a hotel in Chicago years ago. A couple checked in, planning on having a fun evening. The woman strips down, and her partner ties her to the bed. He goes into the bathroom and comes out dressed in a Batman costume. Yeah, cape and all. Batman steps on a chair and is going to launch himself across the room onto the bed. He miscalculates his trajectory and slams his head on the ceiling. People in the hallway hear someone calling out for help. They notify the front desk, and someone from management comes up to check on the guests. They open the door to find a naked woman tied to the bed and Batman unconscious on the floor. Next story. Not me, but my mom. A couple years ago, her and her team were setting a bunch of rooms up for availability after guests left. One of the rooms they went to was absolute god-awful filth. Windows were shut, fire alarm was covered in duct tape, a good few layers off it. Rooms stank of weed, carpet was burnt in some areas, and there were blood spots on the bedding. Next story. Worked in management for an extended stay place. Had a long-time tenant not pay his weekly rent on a weekend shift. Happened before. He wasn't a skip risk. No answer to the door. Open with my master key, chain on the door. Dog excited to see me. Left a cuff key in the lock and a note to pay his rent in the AM. Go to work next AM and check his room. Still chained, so I use our tool that opens them. Dead on the couch long enough that he is black from decomp. Oddly, no smell. Run to the office and call in the big managers. Was a bad day. Next story. A 20-pound marble apron piece on a bathroom sink fell on a guest's foot as he was using a straight razor to shave. Honestly, looked like the bathroom in Scarface when we went to fill out the report. Next story. I worked front desk for about a year. I didn't see it directly, but a middle-aged couple had a room for 4 days and then checked out. When housekeeping went in, they found 3 dead puppies that were left in a trash bag. They had clearly been dead for at least a few days because the room smelt bad enough they had to run the ozone machine for a couple days and leave the room empty. This was at a Holiday Inn Express and Suites. Next story. I was the rooms manager at a small boutique resort in a mountain town. Our guests were mostly wealthier millennials. So I had a number of fun experiences over the years. This one was one of my favorites. The guest was complaining that there was no heat in their room. When I arrived, a very attractive girl in a lace teddy answered and invited me in to check out the heating. She crawled back into the bed while I checked the thermostat. She started talking about how she was just tagging along with her husband, who was in town for business, that he was gone all day, and she was just so bored hanging out in the room by herself. I tried to be polite and keep my eyes off of her while I was trying to figure out what was going on. The room was chilled, but thermostat was working. I made my way across the room to the heat registers. They were blowing hot air. I felt a chill by the window and pulled the curtain back. The window was wide open. I shut the window and turned around with a bit of a smirk on my face. It was beginning to dawn on me what was going on. Sure enough, she's up on her knees in the bed with the top of her teddy off. She asked if I could keep her company and warm her up. I laughed, thanked her for the offer, but told her I had to return to the front desk. She said if I had some free time to come back later. I chose not to return. One of the few regrets of my career. Next story. I worked in the kitchens and was friends with a lot of the managers. One of them found mags stashed in an empty room. No idea when they had been put there. Next story. A friend of mine worked in the hospitality industry and recently, a couple of years ago, hosted a long-term guest that happened to be a meta executive in the Seacoast area at a larger chain hotel. She had seen different children coming and going from his suite to other rooms on the same floor on a few separate occasions. She brought it up at work, and they basically told her to STFU. It's ultimately why she left the industry. Really bothered her. Next story. Many years ago, I worked in housekeeping. Nice resort, not a shady motel or anything, and got a frantic call from a housekeeper for a dreaded red bag, which meant some type of biological nastiness. Turns out the guest had checked out and left a few pairs of women's underwear scattered around the room, along with their contents, which consisted of chunks of runny poop with a bit of blood mixed in for fun. The chair facing the television was apparently their location of choice, since the cushion looked like someone had melted a bowl of chocolate cherry ice cream on it. When the night shift dispatch got there, I mentioned it to him, wondering if it was an elderly lady with issues. Too embarrassed to ask for help and just fled when she checked out. PM. Dispatch said something to the effect of, "I delivered some extra towels there last night, and it was just a middle-aged guy by himself." It took a bit for my brain to reboot, and it didn't like what it started coming up with. Bonus stories. Housekeeper refusing to clean a room because the guests had left about 10 used condoms laying all around. Older man ordering room service, answering door in a robe and cowboy boots. Wife, passed out on couch. Table is covered in various sex toys. Another room service order. Room has multiple women in lingerie. Couple of cameras on tripods. No, they weren't filming a pizza guy scene. They just took the food and tipped well in cash. A well-known actor stayed in the resort for a few months while filming a movie nearby. There were the usual stories of drunkenness, bringing women to his room, etc. However, my favorite was another guest placing a call to the local police in the middle of the night because the actor had managed to lock himself out of his room. He was completely wasted, stumbling around, knocking on random people's doors, trying to find his sister's room so she could help. He was also completely nude. The best part was a quote from the person who called in the police report. Mr. Actor was very unimpressive, in all respects. Next story. I used to work security, loss prevention for a resort, but I've seen too many to count. But the two weirdest things I've probably seen are, 1. A small duffel bag filled with sex toys. 2. A guy answered the door in fishnets, clearly having sex, with a middle school style multicolored disco ball going off in the background. Next story. Lots of blood on the sheets and towels, all over the bathroom. Weird thing is that the couple staying in the room, which was a super fancy honeymoon suite, was just getting married, and both left together just fine and healthy. Super weird. Next story. I'm the room cleaner for a hotel in Cali, and I've worked there for about 2 years. Since then, I've seen loads of disturbing things, but the most disturbing is when one late night I was working overtime to earn more money. I saw 2 boys with hoods walk through. I ignored it and continued my job. Soon, a young female girl, who looked also around the same age, followed as I continued working. Soon later, I heard lots of banging down the hall. Not like a gun, but like taking a bat and smashing a door, followed by lots of moans and wailing. I walked down and knocked and heard glass shatter. I soon called the room and I heard a male voice. As I asked what had happened, they said they just slipped, and the moaning was actually laughing. But a few days after that, one of my coworkers called me into the room with them, and we say blood and what looked to be semen all over the room and a horrible smell coming from the bathroom. We walked in, and all we saw was tons of sex toys that seemed to be used. But it gets worse. We looked in the closet as we heard noise. Turns out the girl and one of the bots hadn't left. He had started ducking her extremely, and she had bruises all over. Cops were called, and the woman is now doing well. Next story. Former night auditor here. A couple comes up to the desk on Valentine's night at around 10 p.m. and announce they need a room, and they also got divorced earlier that morning in the same breath. Now, I will preface this by saying I was against it. I had a coworker who had been working at that hotel longer than me though, so she had seniority. She checked them in and wished them a happy evening. I told her, okay, so when things hit the fan, you're dealing with it, not me. She was like, no, it'll be fine. Besides, we need the revenue. Okay. Fast forward to 2 a.m. and the switchboard lights up with a call from the local 911 dispatch with a welfare check for that room. Around that same time, the guy from the couple comes tripping down the hall holding his face like, she cut me. Cue me looking at my coworker who looks seriously embarrassed. Anyway, the guard is dealing with the guy, and then woman comes running down in an absolute rage, shouting that we are witnesses to his abuse. Then she flees the scene. The guy is still dripping blood on the nice hardwood lobby floor. The guard is trying to get him to leave, but he won't leave. The cops show up and take over. Coming up is the hilarious part of the story. So the guard has to go up to the room to check nothing was damaged. When he radios down to the desk, the radio has crappy signal, so all we hear is something about TV and broken glass. So my coworker asks me to go check to see if he meant the TV was broken or something, and tells him to continue on his rounds. So off I trot. Go into the room. Couch, fine. Fridge and microwave, fine. Move into the bedroom part of the suite? Me. What the heck? TV is okay. What was he rambling about? So I keep looking around the room, and I'll be danged if I didn't see the bed slightly rumpled, and on the nightstand, a bottle of Hershey Chocolate S, and a broken beer bottle and chocolate syrup on the wall. Me. Saucy. Next story. When I was younger, I worked room service in a 5-star deluxe hotel. I delivered a meal to a modest-looking couple, and the next morning, I went to collect the trolley as it was still in the room. When I went in, and there was blood and faces all over the bed and room, they'd even broken a dinner plate to scrape it off the bed. Pretty much every surface was covered or smeared with it. The housekeeping girl declined to clean it, and so her boss had to do it. Hotel workers. What is the strangest, creepiest interaction that you have had with a guest? Next story. Mentally ill that would hide in various places around the hotel and watch the women while he pleasure himself. Cops never did catch him, not that they tried. Scared the hell out of me because I worked there alone at night, and I never knew if he was there until I would walk into the breakfast room or computer room and he'd be pleasure frantically with 2 hands, junk all in red from overuse. Next story. I worked at one of those shitty Motel 6s in 2009. It was located with 2 gas stations and a Burger King off a fairly busy interstate, so a lot of truckers came by. Anyway, he came in with a German Shepherd. I informed him that dogs weren't allowed in the rooms. The guy cursed at me and left. 10 minutes or so later, he came back, apologized, and said he left the dog in the truck. I didn't notice any of the big luggage he had brought in until after he left. When the cleaning lady went to clean the room, she came out screaming, saying there was a dog in the bathtub. I went to check, and there sure was. The poor guy was covered in blood. I called the manager, and he just told me to clean it and write down the trucker's name if any further incidents happened. What I'm assuming happened was he snuck the dog, alive or dead, in the luggage, and I wasn't paying attention to notice. Didn't see him after that, though. Next story. 2 encounters, one worse than the other. The first was this little old lady, probably in her mid-70s, who would go up to all the male employees asking for a sex. More funny than weird. The second was some guy who offered to give me the best night of my life with his 15-inch junk. Not that I believed he had a 15-inch junk, but do guys realize of that size would be painful? Next story. 47-mile guy was creepy, but let me tell you about Diane. I was the AGM at a Red Roof Inn. I know, classy. It used to be a country inn, but the owners were cheap and stupid and wound up in a lawsuit with them. In a college town, and we frequently had a ton of long-term guests. Some of them were great, like the ER nurse who was going back to school and would bring me pizza on the night shift. Or the old lady who used to be a Pittsburgh steel worker and would fight you, so help her. When Diane showed up, we didn't think anything of it. She'd feed us occasionally. She'd stop and talk at the desk sometimes. Told us she was in the area because her neighbor down in good old Tennessee was a mite disagreeable. So she was hoping to move to a new state in a smaller town where the people were nicer, the cost of living was cheaper, and that bastard wouldn't be bothering her anymore. Seemed reasonable. Then, it just started getting weird. We're talking her coming to the desk to tell me that she could tell I was single and she wanted me to go down to the Dollar General and talk to their assistant manager because it was meant to be. Working was not for women, and I needed to move to a larger city to get myself a man. Did I know that her ex-husband beat her? Well, not really, but he thought about it, and she could tell because the way he smiled when they spoke. By the way, the housekeepers are trying to hurt her cat. Yes, she was convinced there were attempts being made on her cat's life because she found a bobby pin in the floor, and it was obviously put there with malicious intent. When her dog chewed up a tennis ball, she came down screaming that one of our housekeepers had eaten it. Her dog couldn't have done it because her teeth don't touch. I still can't figure out what that's supposed to mean. When friends of mine from out of town visited to pick me up from work, they looked too long out of the window, and she was convinced they had called her old neighbor to come take her away. We were constantly accused of stealing her hot water, though she more specifically thought it was our GM who was black, because she hated black people too. We had a college convention in, and there was this black dude, who I remember was named Vincent. He gave me a bracelet and talked to me for an hour about how he and his boyfriend drove cross-country with 2 cats, who was staying on her floor. She came down raising absolute hell demanding to be moved because she couldn't be on the same floor as them. She stalked the housekeepers as they worked, thinking they were planning against her. She thought one housekeeper, named Misty, was the ringleader and would demand she be fired. She tried to steal the reg cards for the guests so she could figure out what cars belonged to who so she could identify her enemies. We had the FOP staying with us a lot, and she'd throw fits if they spoke to her, because why are police in the hotel? And then there's the time she tried to crash a 5-year-old's birthday party to steal the remote control for the breakfast room's television, convinced it would restore the sci-fi channel to working order and thwart our plans to steal her cable. One day she announced at the desk that she had a gun, jarring because she had been screaming at me face-to-face the day before, telling me I was hurt her dog with hair conditioner. The GM kindly kicked her the hell out. We also had a double amputee vet biking for charity that we had to call the police on. The woman who threatened to pass because a toddler puked in the pool. The woman who was only impressed when I actively prevented somebody from dying in our lobby. The person who nearly died in our lobby. The guy who ended life in room 321 and whose blood is still there. The AGM before me who threatened me by breaking his keys in half and rage stalking me. The pantsless lady who used to follow me around asking for a job. The folks who got mad at me and moved all of the furniture into the bathroom. The entire family who apparently all were dying of terminal illnesses and tried to scam us. The gay couple, where one of them was an extremely angry old Russian man who left us a bad review because he had to look at children, and the other Russian guy with the Dolly Parton girlfriend and the silent bodyguard who kept their dog who tried to attack my boss. And then later, all but the bodyguard got arrested. Also, the aforementioned 47-mile guy who was mugged by escorts and showed up high as a kite in a NASCAR shirt covered in grass clippings and blood. And that's just the first hotel I worked at. Next story, I'm on the other side of this. I was a guest that must have freaked out the cleaning staff big time. I was a really small, still am, pale and skinny child with long black hair. Basically cover me in dirt and put me in a white dress, and I look like I belong in The Grudge. I was staying in a hotel room with my sister, and my dad and brother were staying in the room beside us. I had a super bad nosebleed the night we were supposed to check out. There was blood all over the bed, on the floor, on the pillows, in the sink. Basically, it looked like someone had just gotten murdered. My sister wakes up to me wandering around the hotel room looking for paper towels to clean it all up and sends me out to go next door to my dad's room. This is all at 6 o'clock in the morning, so it's still dark outside when I go out into the hallway, covered in blood, and see a cleaning lady round the corner catch one glimpse of me and just turn around and go back the way she came. I don't think it helped that I was wearing a light pink nightie at the time. We cleaned up as much of the blood as we could and left an apology note and a decent tip and got out of there. Next story. I don't work at a hotel, but I do have a hotel story. I knew an older woman who seemed, well, a bit eccentric, but sweet and harmless. The kind of lady you would be cool with taking your kids out for ice cream, but who would probably bring them back to your house, see a crystal ornament thingy hanging in your car, and tell you about the crystals she has that repel bad energy and attract happiness through the use of cosmic sounds waves and fairies or something like that. Basically a sweet but not quite all there granny type. I had no clue she had any really serious issues, until she mentioned once that she was taking some kind of antipsychotic medication, but she didn't specify what or why. Well, one day she apparently decided she didn't need that medication anymore. She made this decision just before checking into a small hotel for a short vacation. By the end of the vacation, so I heard, she had made quite an impression at the hotel. She would be forever remembered as the sweet old lady who suddenly decided one morning that she owned the place, came downstairs to announce to the staff that she was renovating the hotel, and then marched back upstairs and barricaded herself in her room for 3 days. Without paying, of course, because she was the owner after all. Their pleas for her to open the door and get the hell out of their place fell on deaf ears. In fact, when the staff threatened to call the police, she announced they were all fired and she was hiring new people. Eventually, they managed to kick her out of the hotel, but it was partly her own doing. Upon finally getting the police and prying open the door, they found the room empty. A few hours later, the police found her in a nearby church, playing the organ with all the passion of a master musician, but none of the skill, sadly, buck naked. I'm not clear on what happened after that. I think she was somehow convinced to check into the mental health wing of the hospital and get back on her meds. After that, it was like nothing had ever happened. She went back to being a sweet, slightly eccentric granny and never mentioned the incident once. I don't even know if she remembers any of it. Suffice to say though, I'm not so comfortable about going out for ice cream with her anymore. Next story. Old man staying in room by himself, called around noon because he didn't check out and we would have to charge him. No answer. Eventually went up to room and there was no one there, but his luggage was. Bag was sitting open on his bed. Nothing but wigs and dresses inside. Next story. I just remembered a really ridiculous incident with a guest. There was an insane woman who, on the way to the hotel, left her cell phone in the cab. She came to me and had asked if I could call that cab company and then transfer the call to her room. She goes, "Oh, you're the best," and then throws a $5 at the desk as a tip, then walks away. I got a hold of the cab company and transferred to her room, as she had requested. The guy apparently told her that he'll bring her phone back to the hotel as long as she pays $40 or so, because he is back at the airport and that would be his fare if he drives back to the hotel. I didn't know that this conversation had taken place until I was leaving my shift and Ms. Crazy Pants corners me in the lobby, screaming in my face. "I paid you to get my phone back to the hotel, and you couldn't even do that. Do you just take people's money and not do what they ask?" I had to have a security guy get in front of me and deal with her, as if not leaving her cell phone in a cab was somehow my responsibility. I don't know. She ended up staying at the hotel a whole month. I had to deal with her crap the whole damn time. The constant reminders about how I was supposedly paid to bring her phone back for free. Next story. I had a female guest staying for a while, and she needed help looking for an apartment. She was recently separated from her husband. I have a lot of downtime, so I figure sure this will give me something to do. So, my next shift, we're looking at places and just kind of having a nice conversation. The next day I get to work, and my coworker is all, "Hey, that lady left this here for you." It was an envelope with 3 pages, front and back, saying how much she loved me and was wanting to move in with me. Next story. I worked room service at a hotel in downtown Austin, Texas, while finishing my undergrad at Delivered to the Twins, and they tipped me in substances. There's no way to provide proof for this story, but it happened nonetheless. It was a fun job for the most part. Next story. Client. "Can I show you something?" Me. "Is it in relation to your reservation?" Client. Already searching on his phone. "You remember when I said you were magnificent the last time I came here?" Me. Cringe. Yes. He then shows me a photo of some woman with the same hair as me, except the photo was taken from several meters away, and the woman is not aware he's taking it. Client. "You see, I have this colleague I really like and you look just like her. Isn't that funny?" I spent the rest of my shift constantly checking over my shoulder that he wasn't taking sneak shots of me. Next story. Working on a hotel bar in the Mediterranean. A guest came up to the hotel bar and asked where we had gotten the Captain Morgan rum on the bar from. Puzzled, we replied, "The same place that supplies the rest of the hotel's alcohol, we guess." The manager was out, so couldn't ask him. He then claimed that a bottle of that exact same spirit, Captain Morgan rum, had gone missing from his room last night. He claimed that the amount left in was the same as what was in the bottle behind the bar. He implied that the cleaners had taken it. He was actually suggesting, openly, that the cleaners of a 4-star hotel in a popular tourist resort in Europe had taken an unknown bottle of outside alcohol from a guest's room and presumably given it to the bar staff to put behind the bar and sell to customers. He protested for ages that it was his bottle until, thankfully, his transfer bus turned up to take him to the airport. As the bus pulled away, a regular at the bar, friend of ours, did the chug-chug drinking motion at his window. Next story. I used to work at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise in Alberta. One day I was doing room service and got called up to deliver a pasta dinner for 2. I knocked on the door, announced that it was in-room dining, and knocked again. The guy yelled, "You come in!" and I used the master key to open the door. Once I walked in, I saw the very large, very naked guy sitting on the end of the bed pleasure himself and just staring at me. Was super awkward. I had to walk over to him, hand him my pen, and get him to sign the receipt before I noped the hell out of there. Threw that pen out. Next story. Guy checks in, heads out to the bar across the street, proceeds to blast his mind out with booze, then stumble into his room and pass out. That's normal. Then he wakes up, leaves his room buck naked, 60s in age, so not good on any level, and approached the public restroom where he proceeds to puke into the toilet for about 10 minutes. That would have been a good place to end the tale, but no. He proceeds to head back to his room, finds his way into a room housekeeping somehow forgot to secure when they were done, and crash out on the bed. This is where it got fun. You see, I then checked someone else into that room, not aware that a naked, drunk, 60-year-old man was already in the room. Well, the new guests figured it out and requested another room, which was easily done. Then I had to figure out who the hell was in a room I thought was empty, how the hell they got into that room, how to wake him up, how to get his name so I could figure out where he belongs, how to move a drunk, naked 60-year-old man back to the room he checked into. Long story short, we let him wrap himself in the bedding he was using, as we would need to change it out anyway, to get to his room. We managed to get his name so we could figure out what room he was supposed to be in, and carefully walked him back to it. When I say we, I mean myself, a housekeeper, and a van driver. The man was a weekly regular, and it became apparent upon following visits that he had just gotten divorced from his wife of 30-plus years, so a lot of what happened made more sense. Still, it was a rather jarring night that I'll never forget. Next story. I work at a hotel bar. Every few months or so, a lady who gets on coach tours by herself will arrive. She will sit alone in the bar and set up a series of soft toys across from her and spend the evening just talking to them. Sad, really. Next story. I work at the front desk, and one day a guest comes down and tells me that there are people trying to get into his room. From the window, his room was 3 stories high. At the beginning, he told me he believed it was the other guests from adjacent rooms because he was being really loud. Pleasure, because he was there to enjoy his sexuality. But then he started going on about being the police rappelling down from the roof because it had happened before to him and they were out to get him. When he checked out, he told us everything had been terrible and left a sex toy in the room. Next story. We had a guest we ended up calling Pie Guy. He would come into the hotel without a reservation, pay in cash plus the $100 cash deposit, and the next day we would find his bathroom and bathtub full of the remains of several expensive pies. He never came to the desk for his deposit, as he knew he wouldn't be getting it back. We added his name to our do not rent list, but he kept coming back and using different names. One time we found a torn-up list in his room with the words pie and pants scribbled over and over again. As far as the argument that we shouldn't have banned him, I can see the point there. $100 to clean up a pie mess seems like a good deal. I was working night audit during most of Pie Guy's prime, so I wasn't really too involved in the decisions to ban people at that point. The pie was not confined to the bathtub exclusively, it was all over the bathroom. Walls, floor, towels. I imagine it trailed out into the room as well, and darker fruit pies probably have some risk of staining things. I only saw the aftermath once, briefly, about 5-ish years ago. I was pretty amazed at the bathroom, so I didn't spend too much time looking in the room. And yes, it is rare for a hotel to accept cash. Yes, it is typical to get an ID at check-in. We were under some poor management at the time, and like I said, I was just a night auditor, and this was my first front desk job. I just did what everyone else showed me how to do. I still work here. We went through a management change, and we have some much better procedures in place. Pie Guy would never get past us now. Next story. Not a hotel worker, but I had a job stocking vending machines in an area of my city, and one of my stops was in a hotel. One night, I got to the hotel late, and as I started to open up the vending machine, a guy wearing nothing but piss-stained whitey tides approached me and asked, "How much?" I tried to keep a straight face and wasn't sure what he was asking, but I assumed he was talking about how much a soda from the machine cost. I told him it was $1.50 for a drink and that I'd be done filling the machine in a second. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "No. How much do I have to pay you to do BJ?" I didn't answer him and immediately just closed the machine back up, carted the sodas I brought in back to my truck, and noped the went out without doing my job. Next story. Not me personally, but when I was working at a pretty upscale resort, our all-attractive female reservation staff would get weird calls all the time. There was more than one repeat offender, but the main one, most frequent caller, wouldn't even ask anything out of the ordinary or talk dirty, would go through the reservation process very slowly. Just wanted to hear a female voice, I suppose. Me personally, one time while delivering a late-arriving bag to a suite, I knocked, the door opens, and the stench of sweat, must wafts out. An older lady peeks only her head out of the door and says, "Oh good, it's you," and points to where I can put the bag down. I take one step inside, and just off to the right in the main parlor, out of view from the door, is 7 or 8 neither attractive nor particularly unattractive men and women, naked and sweaty, all probably between 50 to 70 years old. The woman thanks me and asks, "How would you like your tip?" I said I had to get back to the front desk. Thanks, though. Next story. I work front desk at a hotel. Not a guest, but there is a 75-year-old creepy lady who comes to the hotel about once a month. She sneaks in the side doors, then will try to sneak into rooms, force her way into rooms. She is a literal maniac, and I've heard weird stories about her interactions with the guests. The police come and arrest her every time, and we don't see her for a few weeks. Next story. There is a very persistent German guest where I work who keeps coming to the counter to ask me out for lunch. Seems pretty harmless, but I have rejected him 14 times, including 2 times just today. Aside from the usual, nobody has to know, and the, well, you can just say I happened to stumble upon you at insert name restaurant. When he first asked me out, he said he was new to my country and needed someone to bring him out to sightsee. Then, he said he wanted to bring me to a park to hike and go on a treetop walk, which provides a bird's-eye view of the forest from a suspension bridge. All that was going through my head was the number of ways he was probably push me off the bridge. Next story. I had a company call me around 10 a.m. and ask whether or not their truck driver had checked out or not. This particular guest always checks out at 6 a.m., so this was rather unlike him. He was still in our system as not having checked out, and his truck was still parked outside. After finding this out, I had a strong sensation of something being very wrong. I went to his room, knocked on his door, no response. I then unlocked his door only to find his swing latch was locked. My intuition was screaming bad thoughts at this point. I ran back to the lobby to retrieve a tool to release the swing latch. Upon unlocking the door, I immediately recognized a lifeless, white and blue body face down on the bed. After finding Mr. Ross, the hotel was filled with police, investigators, coroners, the whole nine. Next story. Buddy told me on a few occasions, Australians and Swedish folk would ask to come up to the room and open the door butt naked, and then ask if he would like to join in. Next story. I used to work as a cleaning lady at a high-end hotel near the Bell Center in Montreal. A lot of touring musicians and comedians stayed there, as well as NHL players from visiting teams. I once caught a guy stalking the New York Rangers. He was decked out head to toe in Rangers merch, hanging out in the elevator area trying to find out what rooms they were in. And I was cleaning a few in that block, so I noticed he was there for a couple of hours, not actually taking the elevator. Anytime one of the players came out, he would talk to them, ask for pictures, quote their stats, etc. They were all really nice to him, but I had to call security to get him out of there. Next story. I work the night shift, so I have many stories, but my favorite is this one. I was doing my thing. Not many people were there that night. I saw one couple walk by, a large man and some woman, but I don't know if they were together. Only couple I had seen, everyone else was alone. I get a phone call maybe 30 minutes after I saw this couple. Some guy with a husky voice says, "Hey, I saw you at the front. You might not remember me. I was with a girl, but I just wanted to ask you something." Me. "Okay, how can I help you?" Guy. "It's a weird question." Me. "Okay, sir, how can I help you?" I had a feeling at this point. Guy. "It's a strange question. It might make you uncomfortable." Me. "Okay, how can I help?" Guy. "It's a weird question. You're just so beautiful. I couldn't help myself. Can I do HJ?" Me. "That is an inappropriate question, and I'm going to hang up now." He said more, but it was last year, so I can't remember everything. But it was so sketchy. Especially because the guard called off that night, so I was alone. Thankfully, the guy didn't decide to come down and ask me in person. It made me feel so dirty. Next story. When I was 20 years old, I was at the hotel front desk. I had this guy come up to me and talk to me for a minute or two. He seemed nice, like he was just the type to joke around a lot. We had a lot of guests who would talk to staff for a long time and joke around and chat, so I thought nothing of it. Finally, he says, "Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down everything I'm going to say." I'm like, "What?" Thinking this was a joke. "No, please, I insist, write this down." I'm thinking this is some kind of joke, like there's going to be some punchline. So I just roll my eyes to myself and pretend like I'm jotting down. He starts with these, "my name is" type of sentences. Again, I'm rolling my eyes to myself. That's when he says something like, "I work 60 hours a week. I do not have time for employees who do this, that, or whatever the hell it was." That's when I realized, no, this is not a joke. It's an assault. I attempted to end the encounter. I said, "Okay, that's enough." "What? Can you not write? What kind of person can't write?" He starts yelling at me, calling me names. Finally, I said, "Sir, if you have an issue you would like written down, here's a pen and paper." It escalates, and finally I snapped. I start yelling at this guy. I told him there are other people staying here who don't need him behaving this way. I told him to get out of the hotel. I think I remember yelling some nonsense about how this is my work, and you can't treat me like this because I work here. Honestly, I don't even know why I said all of that. It was the only time I ever lost it on a guest in the 15 years I've worked in a hotel environment. He starts yelling about how I'm the worst staff member that he has seen working there, tells me I'm a piece of garbage, then throws his car keys at my face and walks away. I even called my boss the next day and told her what had happened, even admitting what I had said. They didn't even care, not even a write-up or anything. Next story. I worked night audit at a Holiday Inn. We had a long-term guest who was an ex-police chief of a neighboring town. He was no longer employed because his fetishes were exposed to the public. He liked to be diapered. He would attend diaper parties. What made him creepy was that a while later, his wife was found dead in their home. A lot of people speculate that he murdered her. He had domestic abuse charges, they fought a lot, and it was known she resented him a lot for ruining their lives with the leak of his unconventional sex life. I don't think it's too far-fetched. Anyway, he lived at the hotel for a long time under a fake name. He was always drunk at night, but would come by and speak to me when he would walk his small dog. It was really sad and a little creepy because he seemed just a shell of a man, like he was so emotionally spent that there was nothing left in there. Nobody ever visited him except once, which was a very rich, much older lady. He was dating her, but she usually just sent her driver or a taxi to come pick him up at the beginning of the night, and then he'd be back before the end of my shift. I would occasionally watch his dog for him during these trips. Weird stuff. Sad guy. Felt kind of bad for him, as he was always nice to me and other staff, but I always wondered if he did kill his wife. He would sometimes get uncontrollable, then he got too drunk. I never witnessed one of the episodes, but was told he'd cry, yell, and refuse to leave the lobby. So management eventually asked him to leave because of them. Next story. I worked third shift for a couple years at a hotel, and the creepiest interaction was with a guy who walked in who initially was asking for prices and soon stayed the lobby talking to me. I had a reasonably sized handlebar mustache at the time, and he went on about how girls wouldn't like that, and girls loved soul patches. It turned a bit when he told me I needed to go and use dating services. Later found out he was on a show about extreme brides, where the host that interviewed him had to leave the room because she felt completely unsafe. There are a couple YouTube videos with him hitting on girls too, and that laugh will always haunt me. Anyway, I was on vacation and came back, and he ended up staying at our hotel. Told my manager all about him, and even showed a police article from him in town. Arrested naked outside, room destroyed, cat food mushed in the carpet with no cat in sight, and told the manager to get him out or something bad was going to happen. 2 weeks later, the house cleaners stumbled into his room, where it was 90 degrees and he was dead on the floor.